Welcome to a new episode of Advancing Consciousness series with Franco Di Nicola. This is a place where people can come to gain further insight and clarity as to what is going on and how we can shift things on a personal and global level, while also accessing higher levels of consciousness and awareness. We bring this series to you free of charge so that many are able to access this information. However, if you resonate with what Franco shares and you would like to support his work to get more content out, contributions are welcomed and greatly appreciated. A link is in the description and will be provided in the chat if you feel guided to do so. Also, we have many previous workshops, such as the most recent, Bringing Out the New You to Play in the New World, along with our membership program, Let's Talk About You, where like-minded people come together bi-weekly to talk about the topics requiring deeper understanding and clarity. All of these are available on Teachable, and we encourage you to check them out as they are great resources at very affordable prices to assist in better understanding this human experience. The Teachable link will also be provided in the chat and is also in the description. And lastly, don't forget to share. As more of us come together who are creating shifts in themselves, the more effective it will be to shift things globally. Thank you for joining us and being part of the change. Enjoy today's broadcast.
So welcome everybody. We get to come together again and play. This is episode 22. So first of all, I welcome you to the Advancing Consciousness series. This is the series that assists us to expand, to reconnect with ourselves, and really access our pure essence in the whole experience that we're having anytime we take on a human physical form. Of course, we can take on different forms on different planets and so forth, but here we are. We're playing the human role. We're playing the human game, and we're on the so-called human planet. So this episode again is a carry on from the episode that we did before on episode 21. This is episode 22, and Ego Uncovered, how it works. So we're going to uncover and unravel the ego so we get a better understanding how it works, what role it plays, and how it actually can be changed within your operating system by just observing it and understanding it and creating a shift from it. A lot of us at this point in time have had a misunderstanding of what the ego is about, how it came about. So we did do the whole episode 21, which we talked about how it came about, how it actually functions and so forth. But now we're going to look at how it is actually operating within ourselves. Now I know we did cover the whole idea and understanding that it does have a very powerful impact in our own personal lives and in our world. But this one's going to be a little bit more personalized. We're going to look at how it actually functions within you. And all of us have come in at one point or another in this journey as we entered into the planet as a playmate and taken on a human form. We did take on what we call an ego, which was a software program that was introduced 10,000 years ago and has been pretty prevalent in shaping our experience. Now, each and every one of us, from a soul perspective, from a human entity perspective, and a physical perspective, knew that this was going to be something that we were going to take on and utilize as our journey forward through the incarnation. Now, of course, this has been around for a long time, so each and every incarnation we kind of knew. Now, each time it was in a different state. Each time it was in a different way of what we call self-learned. And also the impact that it had, which was very interesting, because at those days of the different times and sequences of our incarnation, it didn't have to be as smart, it didn't have to be as clever, and it didn't need to actually learn. Because again, the ego is an artificial intelligence. It's always learning, expanding, and accessing other resources. Now, as we moved along and as the energies have changed, as we have evolved, so-called, evolved in the game of the inverted matrix and of course the inverted 3D, 2D type of experience, that the ego had to actually adapt and actually increase its capacities and be able to access different ways to be able to keep us in a pattern that was what the software has been designed to do. So in saying that, even the level of its capacity to be able to learn and to actually program or upgrade its programming system, even though it was receiving a lot of input on how to operate and the update sort of thing, there was other stages that had to kick in where the soul, the egos were working with other egos, and certain egos or certain individuals that were so-called the hybrids that actually were the controller and actually played out certain roles in the sense of keeping these egos very active, also find it very challenging to keep things at bay. So a lot of introductions of different exposures within our physical operating system to create some more limitations so that the ego would have a little bit more power in its keeping ourselves or keeping us in a state that would not question and start to step out of it. So as the advancement of our consciousness, our access abilities and so forth, is becoming much more apparent that this ego, this software is there, first of all, because most people have not even realized it was there. In fact, most people have felt, and still today feel, that there's nothing outside of that. It's like the ego's world, the projection that it has been utilizing for the longest time is what the human reality is all about. And not only the human reality, the human experience, the human world, all of it was all related into the ego's operating system. And then a lot of the resources that we had access from our own human, or what we call the body and its innate consciousness, the human entity and the soul, was very much limited to the degree that it didn't really have this much access at all. And the ego mind, the ego operating system became so much more elaborate and created so much confusion and distraction and so forth, and creating all these projections, that it allowed us to stay in the ego world for a lot longer than we anticipated. So now, yes, you're either living in the ego world or you're in between, the dancing between the two, and others are unraveling, and some have unraveled completely. Of course, the ones that unraveled completely is a small number, and many of the ones that have chosen to play within all of that have also chosen to maintain a certain amount of it to get an understanding, a deeper relationship with it, so it knows how it functions to facilitate others to move through it. Now, the ego may have served for the longest time in our journey. It has played a very powerful role in having that inverted matrix, inverted 3D, 2D way of life and in its operating system. And as much as we have agreed to hold on to all of that, it came to the point now, which we're sitting at this point, where it's no longer serving in any way or fashion that it did serve before. Now, as long as we're wrapped up in the ego's operating system and all the other components of us that are levels of consciousness coming through at this point, being stifled or minimized as much as possible, the changes really can't take place to the degree that it has the capacity to do so. And this is why the changing of our human experience and world requires access to that consciousness. The consciousness that you've come with, the consciousness that has been gained by the body itself, the consciousness that the human entity has gained on its journey, and the consciousness that your soul is bringing from multiple dimensions and different states of consciousness and parallel worlds and so forth. And it's bringing all of that in to create this new environment so we can transmute the current way of life, the current human experience, the current human world, which is just a fancy or very elaborate video game. So to bring all of those ins to really change. So a lot of times people say, well, we would like to change the way of life. We want to change the experience. We want to really upgrade so that it matches. Because a lot of people are feeling that this world that we're living is not a fit. It doesn't fit. It doesn't resonate. It's no longer, in a way, something that would support us in any way that is in matching the vibrations we're bringing in, the consciousness that we're bringing in, the experience that we are ready to launch and play with. And this is the thing. The reason we're doing that and the reason we're feeling it much more powerfully, because we are being elevated, being triggered, being enlightened in energetically, consciously, and all of these beautiful codes. Plus, many of us have such powerful connections to our soul families that are being streaming very supportive ways to really lighten up. But it still brings us back to the ego software system. So now we're going to take a look at it and see how it actually functions within ourselves, so that you can not only observe it, but also see where it's coming from, and you can create a shift within it. So we're going to carry on and we're going to play. So we're going to do it as much as possible through this episode, unless we don't cover everything that's necessary, and we'll have to have a second part. But at this point, I just wanted to say that we are just going to dive in and play with this. So the first thing we want to look at about egos, there's different types of ego. The ego can take different roles, and it's not like cut and dry. It's like one role or the other role, A or B. There's also the blend, the A-B sort of thing. What's the difference between the roles that we're talking about? The roles that we're talking about, many people have experienced. And the ego can change from one to the other and emphasize one or the other depending on how it can be served in the roles that it plays. So there is the external ego, which still has an internal ego. What is an external? An external ego is very powerfully projected out. It is the ego that actually projects. It's the one that is always dictating to others the way of life. And not only the way of life, what is acceptable, not acceptable, what's good, what's wrong, what's right, and so forth. And actually very powerfully projecting out. And this is the part that people sometimes observe, and many of us have, observe that somebody is playing a very egotistic role. So what does that mean? That means that their ego is outward projected. That means that everything that it engages with, it's always pushing its agenda, it's pushing its identity, it's pushing forth its beliefs and programs and stories of whatever it is, and then use that as labeling everybody, but also pushing it down other people's throats. So this is why you see a lot of times people play very egotistic roles, meaning that they are very not only self-focused, but also very, very, how can I say it, comparing, but also labeling others. Judging is a huge one. So the judgment becomes very powerful, but it's so much external. Now there is an internal version of it also active, but there's more emphasis on the external. I am the greatest, you follow me, I tell you how to do it, everybody else is wrong type of thing. It may not be that accentuated at times, but other times it's accentuated. A lot of times when people go into the limelight, or they become a certain importance, or they are labeled with some authoritative, then the ego actually projects that even more powerfully. This is who I am, and I'm authority. I tell you what to do and how to do it and so forth, and everybody else is wrong and so forth. And you can see how it would engage with others on a very powerful way to create conflict, clashes, and comparison, but also condemning of one another. So a lot of what I'm talking about is when there are two external egos, which happens a lot. It basically creates quite an environment. A lot of people in leadership then tend to go that, or people that get into the whole guru thing end up getting caught up in this external projected ego. I am the authority, I am the one that's right, you guys are the followers, I tell you how to live your life, and so forth. A lot of people in different positions where they go into authoritative in regards to their expertise tend to do that too. And the one thing about that type of ego, it actually creates a powerful shield where everything is directed out and very little comes in. And if any of it comes in, it now projects out even stronger, meaning that if somebody says something to contradict them, they will attack, they will rebuttal, they will actually come back in a conflictive method and proving you that you're wrong no matter what. And it doesn't matter, then it limits also any input of any form of rationality because it's an I am authoritative. So it limits any other constructive information or anything of that nature that would trigger any part of it because it's just projecting out. So that's an external ego. That is a projected ego, and a lot of times people will see that. And they can be a leader in a business or something of that nature, or even in the family. They take on the role of the righteous one, of the one that is projecting very powerfully that this is the way it is. The other version of the ego, which is a lot more subtle, but it actually has such a power to it, is an internal ego. What does that do? That ego actually self-directs everything towards you. So no matter what it sees, it's judging you. No matter what it sees, it's making you feel bad, right, wrong, good, bad, you failed. It projects this idea that you're inadequate, you're not good enough, you're not smart enough, that everybody else out there is better than you. And it does still use comparison, but it also makes you feel small in the sense if you're around somebody that has some form of expertise, anything that you may know gets lowered in its access and takes that from the external ego type version and internalizes it and say, okay, I got to follow this. I got to do this because that's what that ego does. Now that ego also does is also keeps you so much in confusion, so much emotionally up and down that most of the time we're caught up in that world, that whirlwind of cycle that will repeat a certain pattern over and over and over again, but it's self-directed, it's not external. So in essence, you want to do something, you want to take a step forward. What ends up happening is that the ego comes in, oh, wait a minute, that's dangerous, that's not good enough, or they may judge you, they may compare with you, or that the fact that you're going to fail anyways, that you go through and do that. You're going to get rejected. They don't love you. And look at the indications. And it's going to create stories around that. And it's always self-directed to make you feel small, to make you feel a failure, make you feel inadequate, make you feel that in some way, somehow, that you're bound by this. It will judge your physicality, it will judge any form of your look, it will judge any choices you've made, and it will judge and compare any of your past. Every step of the way of your life, it will look at it and keep reminding you of your mistakes, your poor choices, that you missed out on opportunities and so forth. That is self-directed, and that is the internal ego where it fires at you. Now, that does not mean that people do not have both, because they are. But the ratio is one higher in one and less than the other, and it can switch roles at some point along the way. So just to get you an understanding of the external ego and the internal ego. The internal ego. Now, the people that are external, what happens is they have that internal component too. But in fact, what happens is the ego actually shifts and gives you some little blows once in a while, but at the same time, it's much more outwardly. It's looking at the outside world and blasting the world with its story, its program, its perception, its righteousness, and so forth. Where the internal is looking at the world and receiving that as a confirmation of all the stories that it's built, that you're not good enough, you're not lovable enough, that you're going to fail, that relationships end up being bad or whatever, that you're never going to be good enough, or that you're going to feel small. So you have the two egos, the external and the internal, just to understand both. And like I said, you can move back and forth, but the thing is, usually the prominent one is one or the other, and you can shift it. Now, there are people that have had a very internal one, and then it started to shift into external, but never to the degree of the one that is really specialized in the external part of the ego. Both of them, in one way or another, still limits who you are, because both of them label you. One's labeling, but it's projecting outwards. This is who I am. And the other one is internalizing, and this is who I am. It's using it in different methods, but it's doing all of that at the same time. Now, the other thing is with the ego, it is also self-directed. So what it does is actually takes all the resources that it has from any observation. And this is the beauty of it, because it doesn't limit to your own experience, but it also takes into play other people's experiences and so forth. And it will use that to direct the way that you see and experience your world. So again, you have to understand the ego is a story program maker. So it basically creates patterns, programs, and so forth. And I will cover a little bit more in detail as we go along. But at the same time, it's self-directed, and it does not take the input from, say, your human entity, from your soul, and from your body. So even though the information is being come up, it basically blocks most of it out and creates an alternative or an alternate story around that. So even if your higher self or other aspect of yourself, we need to shift. For example, we need to shift a certain pattern, okay? Because this pattern here is limiting you, and it's keeping you in a spiral, and we are choosing to advance. Your ego will come back and say, no, 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 no. What about this? What about that? We can't go there. We're not ready for this. In fact, we can't give up that addiction. We can't give up that experience, because then, you need to indulge yourself. You worked hard. You're having this experience here. You should have this. You should have that. And then it will direct you to focus on certain things coming into your life. And this is the thing about that. And I will cover a little bit more. But you'll see how it creates its own narrative, its own direction, and it limits as much as possible of any access of anything else coming to us. Now, of course, as the energies are increasing and so forth, it's becoming a little bit more unstable. It's not having the same support. So a lot of that will start to break, and this is where the cracks come in. And now some of us have had some major cracks along the way. The other thing is, the ego has a tendency to take on a role that is somewhat schizophrenic. We're just going to use that word. And there is a reflection of certain people that take on that particular role, and it's very apparent. So what it does is actually can shift from one role to the other. For example, it will now create a certain narrative that, okay, it's playing that role where it's saying, we should do this, we should do that, and this is the right thing to do, and if we follow this path and so forth and whatever else, that we will feel better about ourselves, or that in fact, if we take this vacation, or if we buy this stuff, or we get approved by certain people or something of that nature, then we're going to feel good, and we're going to feel powerful, we're going to feel accomplished, we're going to feel that in some way we are making a difference, and so forth. The other part of it is going to say, well, if we take those steps, we may get judged, we may be compared, we could be wrong, and the fact is, taking a step where everybody else is not, could be dangerous, could be, could really soil or stain our reputation. In fact, we got to keep our reputation. In fact, that if we speak out, that we can get in trouble or something of that nature. So you can see one's pushing you to do this and do that. For example, one part of your ego is turning around and say, well, we should get a nice big place, and we should have nice things and whatever else. And then the ego will switch to the other side, where you have the other component. If we get all of that, what are people going to think of you? They're going to judge you. They're going to be jealous of you. They're going to condemn you. They may not want to be your friend anymore, because now you're extra special, you're extra this. So you can see how it swings both ways. That's the schizophrenic. And it could take more than one. It could take several, 2, 3, 4 at times. So then there's always the one in the middle that's basically comparing. No matter where you're going, it's going to make you feel bad or feel that you're not doing it. So one's saying, okay, we should do this. This one, oh, if we do this, we'll get judged. And the other one was, well, I don't know what to do here because I'm stuck in the middle here. And I think I better go and hide now because in one way or another, it doesn't matter which way I go, I'm not going to accomplish what I want to accomplish. And then it actually tunes you down and keeps you in this little, and the box gets smaller and smaller where you're afraid to step forward, because that one will probably focus more on the fear of taking either action or going either direction. But each one are not yourself. Those are the facades, the projections that they create or the ego creates. See how crafty it is and very, very skilled. The schizophrenic part has elevated over the last decade or two because of the fact that we started to see between the cracks. So let's keep these levels coming in from different sides so that we can create more confusion, more distraction, more complication, so that to see the light. For example, if your higher self shares something important for you, and then one side of your ego will say, yeah, we can go do that, and we can impact people, we can do this and that, and so forth, and yeah, we got to let people know that they're wrong, and we got to put them on track, and so forth. The other part is going, oh, we can't go do that because then we may get judged or this and that. We may fail, we could be totally wrong, and so forth. So you could see even any input that comes from a higher perspective, or even information that comes in from other aspects of ourselves that we are watching or learning from or being exposed to, it can go, yeah, you're right, you should do this, you should do this, you should do this. No, we shouldn't do that, that's not for you, you're not capable, blah, 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 and whatever else. So you have the both sides of it. So that's how we can actually play the role. So the reason I'm sharing this is so that you can be in an observer state and recognize what is speaking and what its craft is or what its capabilities are, so you can recognize it. Because one of the things that it does, the ego also uses a thing called emotion, but that's not only emotion, how you feel. It makes you feel a certain way. All of us may feel excited at certain points, feel sad at certain points. We may feel deflated. We can feel icky. We can observe other people, and the ego is going to look at it and say, oh, look at what they have and what they do. And, look, they're living a great life. It's not the life you have, and so forth, right? And the other part is, well, you don't deserve it, and so forth. But it also engages a feeling, like a sinking feeling, an icky feeling, a feeling of depression or sadness, I guess you want to call it, a lower feeling of yourself, and you feel more defeated. So it uses feelings, emotional feelings, really, is the impact. And those feelings at times, it triggers also how your body responds. It can drop your energy level. It could feel that you don't even have the drive to do anything anymore. And it puts you in a lockdown sort of thing where you feel like, I give up, and whatever else. So it has that tendency to do the same thing. So to realize that a lot of times we say, well, we got to follow our feelings. Well, there's different feelings. One is a feeling from the heart, and it does not have this polarized high-low type of thing. It's a very powerful, knowing, clear perspective and energy around that, versus what the ego uses, or what we call the emotional feeling. Because you all notice that the emotional feeling is up and down. You're happy, you're sad, and all of that. And the ego uses the polarization of being happy and then being sad. You have an experience and all of a sudden, oh, great, I feel great, and whatever, I just got something. But that starts to diminish, and I'll cover a little bit more about that. But then it can swing right into sadness. And you could see how it lowers you, and now you're going into that lower state of not only observation, but how you're feeling. So it does use feelings very much so. So if you're experiencing a polarized version of feeling, which is high or low, then it's ego driven, and it's using emotions for that. So when we're going into how it feels, it's more of a resonant feel. It's a feel of a knowing. It's a feeling of, it's not going one way or the other, is high or low. It just either matches, aligns, or not. So it's a feeling of knowing, but it's a feeling of also the feeling of joy. There's an elevation to it. You feel joy. The joy is complete. The joy is not high, low, and it can shift. The joy of whatever's playing out in your life. Doesn't matter what it is. Even if it's been labeled good, bad, right, wrong, or anything of that nature, you experience joy because of your presence as who you are. The presence of the experience that you're involved in and participating in. So it's more of that. So when you really look at it, that's the type of feeling that you were talking about. It's that joy, that completeness, that oneness, that wholeness within ourselves. That part is emanated from the physical aspect. It's emanated from your higher, what you call a human entity, but also very powerfully from your higher self. And that does not have those levels of polarity. It does fluctuate to some degree, a very small amount of fluctuation, but it's only the fluctuation because your focus may have changed or the ego may have gotten in there. But that fluctuation is really not what is fluctuating within yourself. It's just the external, what we call the emotional part, that does the fluctuation. So it seems like it's fluctuating, but it's not really. So that joy, that love, that purity is rock solid. And it's that knowing. However, all the confusion that's created through the ego projection, creates those surface waves. It's like, how can I say? When you're tapping into your higher self, when you're tapping into the core essence of yourself, it's like being in the ocean, in the water, below the surface. And you're in the water, and the water moves very lightly, and you're embodying the whole ocean. You're part of that ocean. So it doesn't matter what's happening on the surface, you're not affected by it. So the waves and so forth are still above you. The currents and whatever else is going on is all above you. You're in the body of the ocean. And that is when you're in your higher state, when you're in that full state, you're in the body of sourceness. Even though the surface is part of sourceness, but that's where all the turbulence exists. That's where the waves, and that's where it fluctuates up and down. So you're tapping into the ocean of energy, the very sourceness of you, because your higher self, your human entity, and does not have the same levels of fluctuation. Yes, it may present certain things, but unless the ego is playing out the role, you will not feel that turmoil. You may have certain memories and certain experiences that may have been carried over, that it's assisting you to clear, but it's very solid, it's very clear, and it's embodied, because there's no separation when you're connecting. The body does not feel separated. The body feels whole in its natural state, of course. It feels whole with all of Gaia and the whole solar system, the whole what we call the galaxy and the universe itself. It feels connected to all of that. It's part of that. The human entity, of course, is part of that wholeness too, because it's part of the whole of the human experience, but it's also what the human experience carries, which is basically the consciousness of the whole planetary component, and also the solar system, the galaxy, and the universe. When we're talking about even the soul itself, it basically has, the biggest reference of its sourceness of all existence, of all creation, of all that is, that has nothing outside of it. It's all of it. So it has more of that. So you can see how that's solid, where the ego is not. That is actually just operating on programs and is digging up any stories, programs, and so forth. So even when we're getting intuitive connections, intuitive information, it's very clear, it's very subtle, and it shares it very in a knowing factor because it's bringing in all those resources. Even when you're connecting with your body, when you're connecting with your human entity, and specifically your soul, it's bringing in all of this information, this consciousness, these energies and awareness and codes and whatever else that it might provide for us at that point, necessary and beneficial to facilitate us. But then all the turbulence comes in. And this is why when we're tuning ourselves, we get that clarity, and then the ego jumps in and just creates story after story after story. Now, the one thing that the ego is really specialized in is directing you and shaping you. So what it does is basically creates ideas of not only who you are, but what to do and what not to do. So it directs you. It gives you instruction, and it's always directing you. This is why you hear all that voice, and then that's why the emotions sway you one direction or another. The steps that we're taking, the choices we're making, in most cases is the ego generating certain ideas of what you should do. And because it's using a lot of the past, a lot of times it brings a lot of those experiences and directing you based on past experiences, based on other people's experience, based on what we can call collective, not only consciousness, what do we call it, programming and conditioning and so forth, and even the programming and conditioning that we have. So it usually takes everything that you've learned, everything you observed, everything that you've even put a reference point within, and it projects a path for us, a direction. So we start down that path and that direction based on what it's presenting to you. And the other thing it does is directs you to focus into the future, how to go there, what steps to take, what really to want, and how to categorize yourself as if you made it, didn't make it, you're on track or not on track. So all of those things come into play. So it does whatever it does, is it maps out, and it's constantly mapping out. So if you're here, you're going to here, it's going to map out. Of course, you've got the past. So we're looking at the past, we're looking at the present, future, oops. So you're looking at the different states. So it's here you are. What the ego loves very much so to keep referring to past experiences. And like I said, it's your past experiences, your labels of those experiences, but also the experiences of others, everything that it's learned from the mass media, through education and so forth. It always takes those resources, whatever it can, and all of this is stored in your subconscious mind anyways. So it uses your subconscious mind as a data bank, information bank. And then, of course, what the ego does, it creates stories and scenarios and so forth. So right here, it's taken all of this that's here and bringing it into the present so that anything that you're experiencing carries all of that over. But then it also likes to project the future. So when it's doing that, it's creating a story of the future is where we want to go. That's why it takes you away from the present. The present is, this is what we have to do to get there. And this is where you're going to be happy. This is where you're going to be fulfilled. This is where you're going to feel good. This is where you need to arrive. Because here, it's not good. So it's going to use all of that. And this is when you're looking at the future and you feel that it's pushing you in that direction and it's dragging all of this stuff, because you can notice it. The way you notice it is that the ego will say, oh, remember what happened? Oh, look, such and such had this experience. And yeah, remember what you learned in school? Look at how you got treated in school. You're not very good and so forth. So that way we need to accomplish for us to get to that point where you can prove otherwise. Prove otherwise to collapse these stories. And it's a distraction, and that's what the ego does. And it keeps us so much recycling over and over again all of these ideas. So when we're looking at the ego itself, it's always mapping out a path using the past, using whatever's going on the planet as a reference point. So right now, with everything that's playing out, it's going to use that as a reference point and project it, and it's going to look at it, and it has a very interesting way of observing, because it will take whatever the mainstream media says or what others will say, and then say, oh look, we're never going to have life the same. And in fact, we're going to be in danger, we're going to be limited, we can't, we're going to do this, we're going to do that, the future is bleak, we got to take steps, we got to go in survival, we got to do all of that stuff. Because survival, just to say that part of it, is very, very powerful in its operating system. The fight and flight part is very much integrated into the operating system of the ego. So if you're into the fight and flight, you know where that's coming from. So it likes to direct along the way and your journey. Then, the other thing is the ego is very good at creating multiple versions of yourself. What does that mean? That means it will create various identities of yourself. So you go to work and it creates a certain pattern, a certain way of seeing, a certain way of communicating, a certain way of internalizing and experiencing that environment. It also projects a certain characteristics of you. You know how we talk about being yourself in all circumstances? Well, this doesn't do that. It's wherever you go, you shape accordingly. What it does is it observes what other people are saying, doing, and whatever. Now, sometimes in the projected ego, it tends to be wanting to take the role of showing everybody else how to live. And then the recipients on the other side are the ones that are playing that role. But in general, you are being, stepping in, say, the work environment, and then there's a whole version of you that comes in. Now, that version could be and saying, oh, this is the role you need to play, this is what you can say, what you can't say, this is how you should see things, this is what you can challenge or not challenge, or whatever. We need to relate with others and so forth. And it will create certain facades of yourself, ways of thinking, the ways of feeling, and so forth. It also creates this illusionary part where you're communicating, but you're incongruent with yourself, because it's kind of, oh, they expect you to say this. They expect you to not question things. We really don't have any say because we're not the boss, or something of that nature, or that we're, whatever. Or you could be the boss position and say, well, you got to be this way and you got to treat people this way, or else they're going to leave, or whatever it is. So he creates that facade. Then you're at home with your own family, and it depends on the family you are. If your extended family, or your family that you grew up with, you will have another version of you, and you will play that role. You will communicate to that degree. You will engage in that degree. You will play the role that they expect you to play, or what they are used to seeing. So you actually go from, say, one role at work, and you're now in another role with that family, and you're playing very different role there. Your way of communicating, what you say and don't say, how you see things, what you agree upon, and so forth, are very different. Then you have another role that you can step into where you are your immediate family. That could be your immediate family dynamics, which could be with your partner, could be with your kids, could be with, whoever else is involved, but that is your everyday one that you meet every day, because certain families you only meet once in a while, or see once in a while, because you've already transitioned away from that family group, even though that's still part of your life, but into your day-to-day life. And now you take a different role there. And of course, there's compartments to all of this. When you're the father, you take one role. When you're the partner, you're another role. When you're the child of the other family, then you're playing another role, and so forth. So you can see all the compartments of those roles. you meet up with friends and it creates another version of you. And that is now that you may be daring, that you may be boasting, whatever. That part of you may be playing whatever role that those friends are expecting of you. And there might be certain sports and certain things that they agree upon and so forth. And even though you may not be totally on board with what they're saying, you still play the game with them because you want them part of your life. So you could see how the ego will compartmentalize and create different versions of you depending on the scenario that you're in. Which, in a sense, is a huge difference from your true essence. Because when we're looking at non-ego projected versions of you, then what comes out is the most advanced version of you as this being, enriched by your experience, which is a holistic component. That means that you, the rock solid you, the one that's come here to do what you came here to do, will play the same role. And when I say the same role, will not deviate, will not create another facade at work, with your family that you grew up with, the family that you may be involved in, with friends, or any other association, because you may go into a group or you may go into different jobs or modes or whatever it is. So you're not stepping into, say, a client, for example, and then you go into another mode. You will stay consistent, but consistent being that true self. And that true self is constantly expanding, and it's very congruent. So it feels natural, not only for you, but anybody that's engaging with you. And when you're doing that, then you don't end up losing yourself in one of those clusters. You end up being kind of not so much a leadership role, but an example role in the sense of being yourself. And then you could actually notice if being in certain groups and the roles that you've played, if it's coherent or not, or if it's consistent with what you are. So you're not shaping yourself to them. And that's what the ego does. It wants to do that because, if we're not going to be accepted. We're not, we're going to rock the boat, or that, and that way we can't create this facade that we are more superior or more leadership qualities or anything of that nature. Or the fact that, if I challenge my family, that they, will get upset with me, and then they'll be upset and all that. You won't look at any of that. The ego does. The ego does, and creates those different versions. So just to realize and to acknowledge and see and notice when you are going in different scenarios, how your characteristic shifts and what roles you step into. I've seen people that can play very, very powerful, authoritative roles. Say in the work environment. They go with the family and you see them become meek. Now, sometimes they're boisterous, especially if they have a external ego. But in most cases, they shift. They go home to the family and they shift again. They're with friends, then they play another version. You probably noticed it through others, and if you pay attention, you're probably doing the same thing. For most of us, we do. Now, you get to the point as you're shifting within yourself, you're no longer molding yourself to the environments and the people. You are the one that's actually being that brilliant essence of yourself, and everything else around you molds. And if it doesn't want to mold, because say you go into a work environment, you being 100% yourself, and it doesn't align, and they don't, are not open to connect with you at that level, then yeah, maybe it's time to move on. Same thing with the family dynamics. It may not be okay, so we won't, we're going to still be family because that's how kind of we've adopted the idea. But we're not going to play those particular roles for each other. So then it all shifts. So that's the other thing to notice, is the ego will create multiple versions of yourself. It also has a tendency to come up as authoritative. It knows better. And you'll see it a lot of times that the ego is very insistent, very out there in pushing forward its authority, its expertise. And when I say authoritative, it's like you're in this moment and you want to make a choice moving a certain direction, and it's going to go, I take care of you. I know exactly because look at all these things. I was with you each and every point of these experiences. We have this record in our subconscious mind. We have all these reference points from all of these experiences that others have had. We've got education. We know I will direct you the direction we have to go. And meanwhile, the part of you is saying, that doesn't resonate. That's not interesting to me any longer. And I have a different knowing, a different perspective, and I'm not here to do that. But in essence, it comes up as authoritative. We know better. I'm here to look after you. I'm going to keep you safe. I'm going to keep you in the box or whatever it may say, but it's not going to use those words per se. But it's also going to direct it in such a way that it knows best. Forget about what your body's saying. It doesn't know best. We got to have fun. We got to do whatever. It doesn't matter what your human entity is saying. No. What I can tell you what's going on. Your soul, it's saying, okay, we need to make a shift. No. Your soul does not understand that we need to play this role. Not only that, we need to make money, and we gotta have power because we're never gonna get there to this happy place if we're gonna follow your higher self in that knowing. No. I know the map. I know the direction. And it comes up very authoritative in that regard. And if you start breaking out of that, then it takes other aspects. So one of the other things it does, it makes you feel very special. And it judges everybody. I'm great. I'm special. I have these accomplishments. I have all those letters behind my name. And I have the other one that's in the front. That's a DR, or that, I went and took these courses, or that in some way I'm just more superior than everybody else. So it will have a tendency to make itself special, or at least create that illusion that you're special, you're better than others. And then it goes around comparing people. It goes judging people. It basically condemns people. And it does all of that. And many of us have noticed that. It takes that superiority state. We got it right. Everybody else got it wrong. We're smart. Everybody's stupid. We have it all figured out. These guys don't know what the heck they're doing. And it will create special. And then with that special, especially the external ego, will go, I got to straighten people out. I got to do whatever. And it becomes very conflictive at times, sometimes very strong in whatever it is. And it can play very strong roles accordingly. And it does that. So it can take you to a point of making you feel special. However, it has a flip side to it. It can also do vice versa? Yeah. Vice versa. It could do the opposite. It can make everybody special, or lots of people special, and you're not. Not only you're not, you're the underdog. You're not capable. You don't have the smarts. You don't know the know-how. You don't have the experiences. You don't have the DR in the front, or you don't have all those letters behind it. You don't have the education. You don't have this. You don't have that. So he goes the other way. Now, it could use judging others. Well, they had a better life. They came through a privileged family, or that, they were luckier or something of that nature. But it makes you feel bad because, in essence, it's saying, we're not good enough. We had the short end of the stick, whatever they call it, or short straw. Short end of the stick.
Pulled the short straw.
Oh, pulled the short straw. Yeah, I'm trying to use some of these phrases that people know. I'm not always great on those. But anyways, that's why I have my little partner here that's always directing me and putting me on track here. Anyways, so yeah, I'm the runt in the litter and whatever else. It's going to come up with all types of things. And my brother, my sister, my friends, or my this, they're all, they had better lives. They had, more support and stuff like that. So the ego can take that part. So you have the part that's, I'm special, I'm great, I walk on water, everybody's got to follow me and whatever else. And, can create quite an interesting environment by others. And then, of course, it could do the other opposite. Sometimes they swing back and forth, depending, like I was saying earlier, depending on the dynamics or where you're entering, who you're playing with. Because at times you could be boisterous because you got everybody that you feel that is lower than you or doesn't have it, and then sometimes you play small because now you're around more educated people, more authoritative people, or whatever it is. So it takes that, and it also uses a lot of fear in the sense of, if you don't show that you're stronger, then they're going to walk all over you. And the other part is, if you show that you're stronger, then they're going to fight you, and so forth. So he uses so many different analogies and that just are opportunities to utilize any part of it. The other thing that we need to look at this point is it focuses a lot on comparison. The ego is very comparative. And we've all experienced where it compares you to other people. And it compares on all sides. It doesn't say, oh, it only looks at people that so-called creates the illusion that they're better than you, but it also compares you to people that are not. Again, it's another illusion. Everybody's at their own experience, and everybody's having whatever experience they require. However, it does a lot of comparison. Look at this, look at that, look at this, and so forth. And it just continues to compare. Compare your journey with somebody else's journey. Compare your present state to somebody else. Compares to the fact of where you were before and now where you are now. And it compares to all the people that you were involved in and so forth. And also compare with saying, oh, that's where I need to go. And, there's such and such a person here, whoever this person is. For me to feel good, I need to be like this person here. So now I need to replicate. I need to copy. I need to mimic, or there's other words that they can be used around that, saying, well, I need to model that person. We didn't come here to model. We came here to learn from certain people, but we're also here to express ourselves fully. And this is the key that we have to understand. But the ego doesn't do that. We need to model somebody else. We need to follow somebody else. Now, some people are going to have more experiences in certain areas. And of course, it's not there to model, to take that information and to learn what they've learned. And then you use it your way. You project and experience it your way with your gifts, your perception, your journey. It's not that I have to be like them. And the whole idea that we need to be like somebody else, again, is only a projection that the ego does. We got to copy everything that they're doing. If we get there, then we'll be like them, happy like them. Stuff, you're going to have lots of stuff like them. Or the fact that, I'm going to be like them and then I'll be accepted, or, others are going to look up to me. These are all ego traits. These are all the different things it projects. So it's just for you to understand it, so you can recognize it. This is not to make you feel bad. This is just to recognize the operating system and say, I see it all, okay. I don't have to give it any more power, and yeah, I may have played through it. And it doesn't matter how deep you've gone into it, how long you've hung on to it. That doesn't make any difference. Doesn't make doesn't change anything. It's at this point, it's okay. Great journey. What do I do with it now? How do I move forward now? Because now you want to be in an alignment. So again, lots of focus on comparison. The other thing that the ego likes to do, it likes to stimulate what we call depression. How does it do that? Well, if you are going to move forward in life, then it has a built-in little option within the operating system that will project this whole experience of depression. For you to experience depression, and a lot of people say, well, it's chemistry and so forth. That plays a small role because that's an after fact, okay? The depression, if you really look at it, and I've analyzed this for the last 35 years working with people and the little bouts that I had at certain times in my journey. And in that observation, we look at what is the contributor or what is the stimuli of depression. Well, the ego's really good at that. It looks at the past, and the focus is, you screwed up, you missed out, you made poor choices, you're pretty well messed up and screwed up now, you cannot move forward, you wasted time, it's too late for you, and it really just keeps focusing on the past, but only on one side of the label, or one way of labeling it, that everything was bad. Your relationships were bad, your family dynamics were bad, your work experience was bad, every choice you made was bad, that you failed, that you weren't good enough, that you're not even worth living, and so forth. And it puts the focus on that. So just so you understand, it uses that, but it taints it. It only looks at one side of it. It doesn't look at the beautiful experiences you had, because an experience is an experience. It does not look at where you are today, without the labels, of course, that of all those enrichment experiences you've tried. There was like different rides that you've taken on. So the ego projects this whole depression, because if anybody that's experienced depression, just pay attention, and you may still be having it now. Pay attention to where your mind is focused. And when I say the mind, where's the ego focused? Is it looking at your current life and judging it to the hilt? That is hopeless? Is it dragging all the stuff in the past? What happened, didn't happen, this should have happened and it didn't happen, this person did this to me and then didn't do this to me, they let me down, or whatever. You know, it will look at everything, even the stuff you did in school as a child, or whatever's coming out. The fact that you messed up just coming into the planet, or at this point in time, it will use anything and everything to create this imbalance within your chemistry, and it just reflects on that story and just keeps playing the story, and then you feel depressed. Now, the best part of it, it likes to drag you into addictions or whatever it is. Now, depression is pretty addictive, first of all. Second of all, it allows you to kind of shape your life around it and probably eliminate a lot of things that you could have eliminated in an empowered state instead of a disempowered state, because depression is going into a disempowered state. Absolutely. Okay? You're not source creator anymore when you're in that depressed state. So you have to pay attention to the stories that it's creating and realizing, wait a minute, I'm not only labeling this, I'm judging it, and I'm putting focus in this. And how do I shift it? And we can talk about some of that stuff in the future in other episodes. But at this point, just to recognize that without the egos creating that projection, you cannot really experience depression in any way, shape, or form. You can't. It requires that story maker. People, when they shift, it's just because their focus of the story shifted. And because of the fact that the egos may have pulled back a little bit, or you've come to the point of realization that, what am I doing focusing here? So it's not so much what am I doing, it's more of the fact of going, I'm not going to give any more power to that. I am here now. Right now, I am who I am. And who I am is pure potentiality. Who I am is this very powerful consciousness. And whatever I've experienced, whatever I've learned, whatever I did or didn't do, whatever choices and whatever experiences I've had up to this point in time is perfect. I am right here. Now, how do I choose to move forward? And that's how that works. So again, depression, ego, hard at work, reflecting on the past, failures, and everything that could or couldn't have. It also stimulates anxiety. Huge, huge, huge component of anxiety. What is that anxiety? Anxiety is projecting the future. Focus on the future. Future based on the past, but the future of a projected idea that it's going to either be too overwhelming, it's going to be bad, that you're going to fail, or that you won't have any control, or anything of that nature. Basically, anxiety is accentuated fear. fear of the future, fear of potentiality, fear of yourself moving forward. And this is how we feel anxiety. We get anxiety when we feel stressed because we have so much to do and that we're going to fail. Because if you look at it, when you have an anxiety attack, what is it focusing on? Tomorrow, the next day, the deadline, or anything else that it may see. Well, you know, I've wasted my time. Here I am. I'm not going to achieve. A lot of times just because you're not going to get to that idea of where happiness is, you start to experience anxiety. Or the fact that you have to do something and it creates, oh, you're not good enough, you're not capable, you're going to stand on stage? No, 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 no. You're going to go take a new job? No, no, no. You're going to go into another relationship? No, 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 no. Because it drags all of the stuff from the past and so forth, and it projects this thing, and then you end up having anxiety. So we're looking at depression, this massive focus on what you've experienced in the past, and the anxiety is the future projected, tainted, shaped in such a way that it's creating a tremendous amount of fear, and it just goes to that level. And again, it's using emotions, it's using all of this stuff. The other thing is, the ego likes to use this thing called non-trust. Not trusting others, not trusting yourself, not trusting resources. And the other thing it likes to do, because of that, it's called overthinking. I'm sure one or two of you have been overthinking. Can't trust it. You got to make sure everything is 100% and checked over and over again. A lot of times trust is in people. Trust is making a choice. Trust that your inner guidance is going to direct you in the way that you think you need to. So it creates a lot of doubt, a tremendous amount of doubt within ourselves. And then it really puts in a spiral because you're always calculating, figuring it out. And the beauty of the ego, which is really ingenuitively, I don't know, what's the word? Very ingenuit, is that correct? It will look at different scenarios and systems of or experiences that you may have had and build around that and use the past references and other people's references and going over and over again. Because it's saying, oh, we can't do it because we had this experience. We can't trust people because we had this experience. Anybody that's trusted anybody else got hurt. And remember, we saw that and we experienced that because we trusted somebody that let us down. And if we don't figure everything out, nobody else, it's not going to work out. I have to think about it. I have to design it. I have to shape it and so forth. And it creates a lot of that. So it will project over and over again this idea that you can't trust anyone, anything, including yourself, and specifically your higher self, specifically what your body's telling you. Because that's where the overthinking comes in, is that now you need analysis, you need facts, and facts on top of facts, because it's not going to just accept the first layer of facts. And this is why a lot of times we get addicted to finding out and researching. Now the researching is beneficial as long as you're open to see and take the little bits that actually match what you already know or what resonates with you. But it's going to say, I gotta have so much more facts. I gotta process this, and I gotta decide if, you know, do I do this or do I do that, or something of that nature. It creates a lot of confusion, and it creates that non-trust within ourselves or anything else, and the overthinking. A lot of people overthink everything. You want to take a little step, you want to go out, you want to do something, and it's like you're calculating like crazy in your mind. Should I, shouldn't I? Maybe I should go after dinner, or maybe I should go in the morning. Oh, if I go do that, how about if I run into somebody I don't want to talk to? Or I'm not feeling really good about myself today, and I don't want to meet anybody, and if I go there, I might end up, and it's just going on and on and on. You want to go on a date, or you want to meet up with somebody, or you want to meet your family, and there's all that overthinking. It's like, oh, I'm going to show up there, they're going to talk about me, and then I can't play the role, and they're going to judge me, and so forth, and there's so much overthinking. Should I go or shouldn't I go? Well, maybe I don't go today because I'm not feeling up to it, and so forth. And so you see a lot of those patterns. Go ahead.
SG has just commented, anxiety can also be now, i.e., feeling stuck, unworthy, lost, not just in the future. Same with depression. It's not just the past from my own unique learnings from both. It can be all the same thing.
Yes, yes. So again, even the stuck state, feeling stuck and so forth, you're looking at your past and saying, okay, I made very little progress and I don't even know how to make progress forward. So you can have all of that built into it. So you can be in the present and then feel stuck. But why are you feeling stuck? Because you're not looking at any potentiality that you have or even your capability. You're looking at, this is all I've been able to accomplish up to this point in time, and I don't know if I'm equipped to do this. So then you can get easily in a stuck state, and then you go into a panic. You can go into that so-called anxiety. Thank you for that point. So it could be very current too of whatever's going on and feeling stuck. And then the thing is, if you feel stuck, then the anxiety comes up, the fact that I'm going to miss out. And I've missed out before. And look, everybody else is moving. I don't know what direction to go, what choice to make, that I can make a mistake. And based on other choices I've made, I have a reference of mistakes. Or that I've seen other people make these choices and make mistakes, or what is interpreted as mistakes. Because basically just the ego labels things as right, wrong, good, bad, right, mistakes or not. Because everything is just an experience. We've come here on a playground to experience, but everything else is really just a label that's been given to it. An experience is an experience. And it always goes back to that. So thank you for that. The other thing the ego likes to do is go into reactive mode. Defense mode, reactive mode. So you may hear something. For example, somebody's saying something. So they tell you about a circumstance. One of the things that the ego can do is be very selective. Only let you hear or focus on certain parts of the conversation. So somebody is saying to you, you know something, I've noticed that people that do this, this, and this, whatever it is, end up having this particular situation or scenario in their life, and so forth. And it's said more to it so that it gives you a broader understanding of what's going on and as a part of an observation. But the ego has a tendency a lot of times, because if it wants to trigger you and keep you in it, it will only hear certain parts of it and self-direct it, and then it goes into reactive mode. Offensive in a way at times. Or the fact that they only heard part of the equation and now you have to go into justification, or we have to go into the fact of quantifying your story, saying, no, you got it all wrong. Meanwhile, the person was not saying any of that, or the information that came in. For example, you may be listening to a report of some sort, and it only picks up on key parts of it and misses the rest of it, and then builds a story around that, and can create anxiety, can create fear, can create anger, can create emotional, and go into that reactive mode. You can see a lot of people when their ego is really at prime, they don't listen. They are ready to jump all the time. So, you're trying to have a conversation with somebody, or somebody's having a conversation with you, it can go either way, and they will jump and react automatically, and all you're doing is making a point. You may be just sharing something. It's not directed to them, because a lot of times the reactive is that they personalize. It's personalized. The ego, it's a direct attack to you. It's not a point of view. It doesn't matter if they said that, people that do that, even if that person didn't even know anything about that, about you, for example. But the ego is going to go, they know, and they're directing it to you. Now it's time to fight. Now it's time to retaliate. Now it's trying to prove them wrong, and so forth. Meanwhile, that conversation was none of it in that direction, but it does that. So just to notice, if you're reacting, that's the ego itself, and it is also selective in what it hears. Now, sometimes we may hear even a video like this. We only hear bits and pieces of it. That's fine, because we may not be ready to hear the whole thing, but a lot of times our mind gets in so busy hears a couple of words and starts building stories around that and using equations of saying, oh, yeah, I remember I heard this from somewhere else, or this happened to this experience, or this person did this, and so forth. And you miss out the rest because it's going to keep you busy focusing on just a few things that was said at one point or another. And then sometimes you hear it again the next time and whatever, it's like, I don't remember hearing that. But now it was a little bit more receptive to hear some other components of it, but it can also take you down another path. Because you notice, even when you're meditating, a lot of times what happens to the ego? The ego is always trying to distract you. You know, you focus on the breath. Oh, I don't think I'm breathing correctly. Or the fact that, yeah, how about if I hyperventilate? Or, or thought or something of that nature. It's the same thing. So the ego will have a tendency to be reactive and selective. Selective of what it hears, selective of what it accepts, and so forth. So if somebody turns around and says, we need to look at some of these things that play out, and if we don't, it could lead down this path, and then the ego will react and say, oh, okay, so if I do this, this is what's going to happen to me. And yeah, and you're already projecting it. I've seen this happen before, and you say, well, what happens if this occurred? How would you feel? Oh, that's what's going to happen to me? Or blah, blah, blah. Or how dare you say such a thing? And I go, no, I'm just asking a different question. And a lot of times, that's what the ego does. The other thing that's very good with the ego itself is that it likes to use reference points that the mass media uses. What do I mean by that? That means where other people are following a certain story, line, narrative, idea, and so forth. So for example, you may hear alternative information. I'm just going to use that label because that's what everybody calls it, but is it alternative? No, it's another source of information. That may have more information, may have more clear information, doesn't matter. The ego likes to say, oh, it's on TV, others are doing this, others are putting a lot of focus on this. This has got to be right. So we only accept this. And it doesn't matter. So for example, if the mass media says, oh, we got to wear masks, we got to do this, we got to do that, we got to be careful, we got to be, sanitizing every part of it, you got to stay away from people, whatever it is. That's what the mainstream media say. So the ego goes, oh yeah, because if we're in that state, we're not only in fear, we're going to have so much distraction, we're not going to even listen to our higher self, and should other information come along, all of a sudden it becomes conspiracy, or it becomes, oh, that's not supported. Meanwhile, the mainstream stuff may be totally unsupported. It may be total lie. It may be a total narrative skewed version. But the ego is saying, no, that's authority. That's correct. They're the so-called experts and blah, blah, blah. And they wouldn't say it on TV if it wasn't, I'm just using one example here, if it wasn't accurate or something of that nature. So we'll have a tendency to filter out and shut down any other information besides what the collective likes to believe. So you'll see that the followers, you become a follower because the ego wants you to follow, because that way we support each other and play, get caught up in that aspect of it. So it's just so that you know. The ego can take the role of bragging, I'm special, I'm great, I'm this, and condemning others. And it likes to condemn others a lot of times, especially when it comes to the judgment part, because if you're feeling insecure about yourself, if you're feeling not good enough, or I'm just giving you examples here, then it will look for other people that are considered less good than you, or that you can judge and project forward and say, oh, look at what they're doing. Because in yourself, the ego, of course, has created that storyline that, you're not capable, good enough, whatever it may be, and then it's going to look for other people. Oh, look at those street people. Look at those people that are, violent in the stores or acting this way and so forth. I'm better than that. I'm not like that, whatever it is. But meanwhile, you have the subtle part of it. So you have that, that component. The other thing it likes to support different narratives of creating righteousness. It's like, I'm right. And it feels good to be righteous. So it creates that scenario and it creates that experience. Because in righteousness, then it also blocks you from being observant, receiving other inputs, and fully engaging. Because somebody may be sharing some information that may be very beneficial, but if you're righteous, then it's not going to not accept anybody else's input or anything of that nature. In fact, everybody else is wrong. I know it. I'm right. I'm righteous. So it plays that. The other thing the ego does is it's so easily programmed. It's designed to be programmed. Of course, very low frequency programming. So it becomes programmed. So that's why education could work to the same degree. And this is why the mainstream, movies and other people, what they experience and so forth, it uses that to set its own program and default response. So it's easily programmed and loves to be programmed because it can use that accordingly. So it really highly relies on programming. It actually needs that as a component for itself to self-navigate and to create those narratives or stories or storylines or directions of that. So it has to take all of that. So it's always learning in a sense, but it's learning very selectively. And it's looking at things that can be used to create a perception of how things are. So just to understand that. So it will also do anything to discount and distract from our higher self input. It will use anything and everything to distract you. This is why a lot of people have a challenge in advancing their consciousness. Even though on the back end you're advancing consciousness, the utilization of that advanced consciousness becomes a bit of a challenge, because the ego, when it's fully active and it brings a lot of that to the surface, it is constantly distracting, constantly creating stories left, right, and center, and it's loud. This is why, you're asking for a direction or input or even clarity, for example, from your higher self. It says to you, yeah, we should shift this. And then what does the ego do? Instantaneously, shortly, right after that, within seconds or milliseconds, it'll come up with a whole bunch, a host of stories, reasons why not to trust it, doubt it to no end. Well, how do you know that was correct? How do you know that's after your best interest? Oh, such and such did something like that, and guess what happened? So you just pay attention to it, because it does everything to distract you. And a lot of people feel that way, feel that distraction. And since the ego is the loud one and uses emotional charges of right, wrong, good, bad, happy, sad, you can recognize it, that it is your ego, because it uses that level, where the knowing is rock solid, it's very joy-filled, love-filled, and so forth. Another thing to notice, if you get pissed off and want to fight, it's the ego. Ego loves to fight, likes to pick a fight, but also at the same time wants to get pissed off. Your higher self's not going to get pissed off. Your higher self's going to say, hey, I'm going to keep nudging you until we get whatever we need to get, move forward, and so forth. But if you're reacting emotionally, you're getting pissed off, you're judging, whatever it is, it's just the ego operating system at work. And it's doing a good job. It can create personality fragmentation, which we talked about earlier. It loves to use emotions and to direct and control, because look at it. When your really strong emotions come up for you, how often do you feel paralyzed? How often do you feel that in one way or another, those emotions, fear or otherwise, will shape the choices you make, direct you in a certain way, and will limit, or in this word, control what you actually ultimately decide to experience or do or interact with, or the direction you may take. So all of it comes into play because it has a tendency to use emotions. And this is why fear is very powerful, because it's very paralyzing. And that stops you from moving. Your higher self is saying, okay, you need to go do this because this is what we've agreed upon, this is what you're ready for, and so forth. And then the ego is going, oh, no, they're going to judge you, they're going to do this, they're going to do that, and create fears, or you're going to fail, you're going to make a mistake, you're not going to be able to do this, or people are going to ridicule you, and so forth. And it does all of that. The other thing is to also understand that it creates a lot of false versions of you. I know we talk about, and I've talked about it before, to be the true you. What do I mean by false you? Well, the false you is a you that is determined and shaped by your programming, your experiences, the stories and so forth that you have acknowledged, your education, your interactions with others, and it creates a version of you that says, this is who I am. I am such and such. I am this particular gender. I'm this and that. Now, I'm not saying there's bits and pieces of that you are those components of it, but it will create and build a false version of you. And this is sometimes what happens when people go through a crash point where they're looking at their life and saying, what is my purpose of my life? I've lived a life of such and such, and I can't relate with him. I don't even know who I am, because that false version is dissolving, and that's when you discover your true self. So it has a tendency to create a false you. I am such and such. I am in this expertise, and I know it, and other people have to follow me, or whatever it is. Those are false versions of you, or versions of you that act a certain way in one scenario or another, like I was saying earlier in the episode here. So it does have a tendency to create a false version of you. Because a lot of times what happens is that we create a version of ourselves that we buy into, and then feel that that's who you are, when you're a lot more. So it basically creates a very small version of you. And that version of you will experience limitations, will experience non-flexibility, will experience being locked up in a sense. And you end up having so-called identity crisis or something of that nature. But the only way to have that experience is basically when a lot of the false state of you, or this illusionary state of you, this facade part of you, starts to collapse and then that has been your reference point for so long. You thought you knew who you were from this, even though you didn't probably resonate completely from it, but at the same sense, that's all you knew. Well, that part will crash, so you actually discover the true you of who you are, this beautiful being that you are. So it does have a tendency to do that. It's also very good, and many of you can relate with this, it makes you very blind and unable to see the ego at work. To the point, the way it communicates, the way it shares, the way it does, it makes you feel that that's who you are. And then you don't see anything else. So all you're seeing is, this is who I am. This is how I think. This is who I've been all this time. This is me. And now many of us are saying, well, it doesn't matter. This is me. This is who I am. Right? Well, a lot of times that part that you're saying, this is who I am, is just the ego's version of who you are. And it does that in such a fashion you don't even recognize it's the ego version of who you are, which is again a facade based on program stories, belief systems, and what it's adopted and whatever you utilize. And again, you have to understand the ego likes to keep you in an unevolved state. It wants to keep you in a, what called a 2D sleep state, or an inverted 3D where everything's backwards, or to start kind of live in this inverted matrix where the inverted matrix made the false you, or the ego you, as truly you, and the true you was the false you. it had everything in reverse. Then the question comes up, what is a healthy ego? Is there such a thing as a healthy ego? I know this has been brought up in the past, some psychologists and I think some other experts, and saying, well, ego is necessary, and there's a healthy ego and there's an unhealthy ego. And the thing is, again, is there really such an ego? An ego is a software program. That software program has one narrative, one direction, and that is to create an illusionary aspect of you that reflects the inverted matrix, inverted 3D and 2D state of being. So when you apply that, can we reprogram the ego? Well, let's say one thing. If it's designed and written that way, why would you need it? And say, well, I can reprogram my ego so that it serves me. Well, let's say I need a software to determine how my life works, or can I rely with my overall consciousness, the awareness, the experience that my soul provides, the experience of multiple human incarnated lives from our human entity, the knowledge, the consciousness, the energy, the awareness that your human body connected with Gaia, with all sentient beings, with the whole planetary, including the sun, not planetary, solar system, and the galaxy and the universe. So you're saying now, I prefer that program over all of those other resources. Then you can say, well, okay, I can create the program based to reflect all of that. But then the program is constantly limited because you're always constantly reprogramming it. So then it becomes a job where you're reprogramming every time there's an upgrade. So the best thing is to let the mind do what it does best. It's always taking resources and always constantly creating realities based on the most current information, the current consciousness, the current energies and codes that come along. The ego can never keep up, could never be reprogrammed. It's a heck of a process to do so because it has its limits. And this is why when you challenge the ego, when I say challenge the ego, you question the ego, it only goes so far before it loses its grip. Especially if you're asking questions and directing it and trying to get to the source, it only can get so far. You can say, well, we can expand the ego, we can program. But why would you have training wheels? And you say, okay, I'm going to spread the training wheels a little further, raise it up a little bit, and so that I have a little bit more flexibility, or that I'm going to just put it there as protection or something of that nature. Or do I just take it off completely and then really, ride freely? Huge difference. So this is the thing. So is there a healthy ego? No. You may doubt it. That's okay. Figure it out. Focus on it. See if you can do that. This is why I said it's hard to program. It's always limited. You're all constantly working with it. Is that the project you want or not? Because the thing is, the fear that people comes up, if I don't have an ego, I don't know who I am. Well, that's not how it works, because your conscious mind has a good reference that who you are from all aspects and how you reflect, how you are part of this human experience on this playground. Go ahead.
Raver581 is asking, if the ego was completely offline, would we automatically go into more embodiment and or oneness?
Well, yes, because what happens when the ego is out of the equation, you're not going to have the distractions, you're not going to have the multiple inputs that I've talked about throughout this whole series, through the whole episode. So then you're not going to have, for example, here's this powerful computer, the mind. It's a very powerful computer. But there's no software there to create distraction. There's no software that's creating limits and has a particular agenda to keep you in a certain state. That's not there. So now the mind is receiving direct input from your body, from your human entity, from your soul, and now creates a beautiful alignment and is staying very current. So that whole experience of oneness becomes, because it's the ego that's projected separation. The ego is projected fight and flight. It's the ego that's projected the right, wrongs, good, bads, and all of that stuff, but also that we are in survival mode and that we cannot survive without it and without having the program there. So now you get to see yourself more as one with everything, and you really advance very powerfully. Go ahead.
Peter is asking, can we eliminate ego and how?
Why? It's so much fun. Yes, you can. At any point you wish to. It's a process because it's a learning process for you. I'm not saying it's a process because it's hard to do. It can look that way, very much so. But it's a process where first you recognize it. You get to learn from whatever it's provided for you as experiential. So you become much more in tune with how it played out. And then there's that transitional part where you bring it out of obsolescence. You don't put any more focus on it. You clear it out completely. And then you're accessing more of yourself. And that becomes the shaper of your reality from that point. Moving forward in a powerful way, yes, if the ego is not there, you're not going to have the same amount of obstacles and everything else that's been, creating certain challenges in a sense, and storylines and whatever else, and dragging any of the past. Because without the ego, the past doesn't even matter. It's whatever you learn and experience at that point. You keep that nugget, whatever that is, to be utilized if beneficial, but there's no labels. Without the ego, there's no labels. Now, there may be labels in your subconscious mind, but the subconscious mind does not use it in the same way. It's a library. Unless somebody pulls out that book as a reference for the library and opens it up and starts to read it, which the ego does, and it has a tainted version of it, then whatever's there is there. So there's a belief that you're not good enough, but it's not going to be projecting it forward. And those books become obsolete anyways, because energetically you're clearing it out anyways. You're clearing out. It's the ego that keeps dragging all of that. So can you get rid of it? Absolutely. And that's the process that we're doing, because the ego is still the only reflection that we have left that is reflecting that 2D inverted 3D inverted matrix. That's the reason that the ego was put in the first place, for us to be able to have that experience and still give power to the inverted matrix, because without the ego, we wouldn't be able to experience the inverted matrix, because it didn't matter. We had such a knowing within ourselves that we would have negated all of that. And the ego is very good at using it against itself in keeping you distracted and making you feel frustrated.
Gretchen is asking, how does 0 point fit into this equation, I guess, of releasing the ego?
Well, yes. When you are in 0 point, neutrality, holistic state, you're now stepping into your source essence. You're a part of that source essence in a cooperative, connected way. When I say that as a reference point, you can see the ego much more clearly. You're now in that observer state, and you see the big picture, and it doesn't matter what picture that the ego is showing you, that does not have power over you. Not only doesn't it not have power over you, you wouldn't even give it any credence or focus on. So going into neutrality and 0 point, you can see it and you can disarm it and clear it out a lot easier. Because this is the focus that we're going into, is neutrality. Neutrality is not using the polarization. There may be some variance of polarization in a very small state as you want to experience certain things, but you're not living in polarization. You're not living in separation. Because in 0 point, everything is inclusive. You're also in that knowing state of who you are, and then you can see the stories, the programs, the narratives, the different structures and systems. You see it. First of all, there's nothing wrong with any of it, but you could see how it needs to be upgraded, eliminated, or just basically in some way or another unplug it from the equation of not only your reality but the collective reality that we're going through. So it does play a very, very powerful role within it. The other thing it likes to do is make you concerned about what other people think of you and how people see you. How many of us may not make certain choices or are very careful to be themselves because they're afraid to be judged, compared? How many times do we stop ourselves from being ourselves because there's a concern, and this is what the ego says, you got to be concerned about what other people think of you and how people see you. They can see you crazy. They can see you as a misfit. They can see you as something wrong with you. You got to make sure that everybody understands you and sees you in a true light. And most of the time, the true light that you're projecting is the false version of you. And then you stop from being yourself because you're focusing on shaping your life so that everybody thinks of you a certain way. But I can tell you one thing, and I'm sure you've come to that realization, or you're coming to the realization now. It doesn't matter what you do, because even if we go back to what I said earlier in the episode that we started today, is that we can shift from one version of you to the next version of you, the next version of you. The reason a lot of times we take on those versions is because we're concerned about what other people think or how they see you. So we now replicate what they expect, what you think they expect to see, or what they're projecting, you now align with it. But regardless, people are still going to think of you a certain way, and people are going to see you a certain way. But you want to know a secret here? Something I learned personally from my observation and my own experience, and I can't say I'm 100% in that, because I still have little bits and pieces of it time to time, is that I came to the realization it does not matter what they think of you or anybody thinks of you or sees you, because the part that sees you a certain way and thinks of you a certain way that would be somewhat that you would be concerned about is only another ego. So when I started working with people 35 plus years ago, I'm losing track of how long it's been, but it's over 35 years, I started to notice, because I could see what people's thoughts were, and that was a good point that I went through where I could observe people's patterns of thought and how those patterns came about and how they put focus on it and what was the story behind it. But what I came to the realization, if you truly want to assist somebody to shift, what they think does not matter. It's what the soul is communicating, what their higher self, their body, their human entity, and their higher self, their soul, is communicating, because now you're getting to the source of what it wants to achieve and assist that human representation to do what it came here to do. So what their soul had to say was where I put my attention, where their body would say something or their human entity, because they would share some valuable. What the thought forms, what they thought, was just a reflection of what the ego was saying, which was good to see and say, well, I'm not concerned about the thoughts, but these thoughts, this part of the program exists, so how can we go clear that? And a lot of times the higher self would tell you what needs to be cleared or addressed. So why would you be concerned of what people see about you or think of you when those two components are coming from another version of ego? If you want to step out of ego, you don't give any power to that. Especially if you unplug your ego, it won't be concerned what people think or see of you, because you're being you. And you are the expression you came here to be. And everybody's here to be a different expression. And there's a perfection in all perspective and all reflections and all experiences. There's nothing outside. One's better, one's not, and whatever it is. So it's really just getting to that understanding. Go ahead.
Peter is asking, when we like or dislike on Facebook, is that ego? You know, I like that post, I don't like that post. Is that ego,
one.
or is that your higher self saying, yeah, I like that?
Well, you tell me. What do you? What is your input?
My opinion on that would be ego.
Okay. Okay. So sometimes you would like it, and that would be because it resonates with you, and that's how you respond to it. So if it resonates with you, and it's like, yeah, that reflects my knowing. It's an alignment of what I feel. So you may click like. But, and in the dislike part, you may say, well, I don't agree. Normally, the higher aspect of yourself is not going to be so much in an agreement. Oh, yeah, you can believe whatever you want and so forth. It's not a like and dislike. However, the like and dislike in the fact of just the core point of liking and disliking, and it's not so much the agreement, because there is agreement to it in a sense, is basically the ego. Oh, I like that because, you know, it makes me laugh, or it's funny, it's this or that, or points out whatever it is. Or I dislike this because it's against my knowing, or not even so much my knowing, my story, my belief system, or whatever it is. So it can be involved in both, but the majority of it is the ego, and there are times that you may hear something and I like it because the fact that it resonates, it totally matched with what I know within myself.
Okay. Madeline is asking, when I look for the weak spots of the ego, is that the ego itself playing?
When you're looking for the weak spots,
Okay.
so the faulty parts of it?
Yes.
Okay. A lot of times that's what the ego does. It finds fault within itself so that it keeps you wrapped up in a loop. So it's ego playing with ego, and it's very good. So when you're an observer, you can now see from a higher perspective the stories and whatever else is presenting, or what the ego is generating. And then you say, oh, okay, this is what it's generating. Does it resonate? Do I want to play with this? Do I put focus on this or not? Or do I just acknowledge its presence? I thank for its presence. I love the presence, but I release the presence. I release it, let it go, clear it, whatever it is. So it's not looking for fault, because the ego program is the ego program. It's going to do whatever. But if there's a fault finding, or finding loopholes in it, or whatever it is, it's ego against ego. And it's a good little dance. This is the beauty of the evolved ego that, you know, we are a lot of us are experiencing at this point in time. Okay. Of course, it creates the whole idea that if you're yourself, then people are going to think you're weird. And then sometimes what happens is the ego jumps in and says, oh, you got to be yourself, and this is yourself. For example, there are people that would dress like a certain, I remember some years ago working with some kids, and they would dress gothic, or they would dress with certain outfits, or act a certain way, and so forth, because they wanted to be the cool, or they wanted to be different, you know. So a lot of times what I've noticed is they were not being their unique self and unique expression. They were mimicking or copying somebody else's expression, you know. And I remember having a conversation with somebody that was all dressed in gothic. I'm not saying that one thing is better than the other. I'm not. I'm just using an example. And a young person, and she had come to do a session, and it was not 100% her choice to come and do the session. It was more of her parents pushing her, but she agreed to come for the session. Anyways, we were sitting down, we were having the conversation back and forth, and she was saying, well, you know, I want to be myself, and I want to dress the way I like, and, you know, the piercing and all the other stuff that was going on with the outfit. And this goes back quite a while ago, so it was less common. Well, it was common, but not as common it is now, whatever, with tattoos and whatever else. And So he said, well, this is my expression. This is me being me, right? And I want to be unique. And I go, well, what part of what you're expressing is unique? I mean, the outfit is what certain other people, clusters and groups have been representing, dressing and acting a certain way, wearing certain, multiple earrings and whatever else is a new thing, a statement of some sort. Putting skulls or whatever else, there's tattoos and whatever else. Those are all reflection. I go, is that really your uniqueness, or are you now looking at it and I want to replicate a rebel component and copying elsewhere what other individuals are doing and so forth? I said, well, original is original, and that original would not apply itself to what others are representing. It would be very unique in that regard. Okay, there might be some similarities, but now you're dressed and acting and talking like this cluster. So are you really being unique, or are you being selective to say, that's what I want to be part of. I want to represent that group within it. Now, of course, it's going to be a little bit of a conflict within the family dynamics, because the family dynamics may not have supported, and you may want to be the rebel or whatever it is, and that's fine. But don't see yourself as unique, because when you see the uniqueness, the interesting thing about that, from that conversation and a couple other sessions I had with this young lady, I had not seen her for like 12 years. 12 years later, I saw her one day and I didn't even recognize her, because of the fact she had changed so dramatically. She dropped all of that stuff and she was actually being herself. And in fact, she became more spiritual, and she started to connect and meditate rather than listening to certain music, dressing a certain way that reflected a certain cluster. And it was more of her. And then there was this gentleness, this loving being that showed up. I mean, some of the marks were still there, whatever they held, and she did some stuff to remove some of it or cover it up or whatever. But that's when, at some point along the way, with the changes that she did, she actually became herself. So that was the thing. Go ahead.
Okay, this is from Peter. Is our higher self always testing our perception?
Always testing our perception.
So is our higher self always going to test how we're viewing situations or perception of life? That's what I'm gathering.
Yeah, it will help stage scenarios so that you can see things that you normally won't see, so that you can observe how much of it you're being truly yourself and how much of it is an ego projection or a cluster projection, or what we call cluster consciousness. Because, I mean, there's the collective, but there's all units of collective too in smaller groups that represent certain things. So the ego will, especially if it's assisting you, and for all of us it is in one way or another, assisting us to break out and to be fully ourselves, it will create scenarios, situations, and observations that will show you how much is program based, how much of it is ego that is using it, and so forth. So it's basically showing you the version of you that you're not really you, and it helps you to kind of make a shift so that you become that natural aspect of yourself. Okay, just give me a second here. I just want to see how many more stuff I've got. Oh boy. Oh no, it's not that bad. Okay. All right, I've just got some points here, so I can go faster because I've covered a lot of it already. I know. We're almost at the 2-hour mark. I'm getting there. Okay.
How far over are you going?
Probably 10 more minutes or so. Okay, so some of these we can go really quickly. Okay. The other thing is the ego is very good and is very supportive and very stimulating to addictions, distractions, and avoidance. Addictions keep us stuck in a pattern, makes us feel bad, and it also keeps, so it basically pushes you to do it because that's good for you, or you deserve it and you need to enjoy it and so forth. And then at the same time, it beats the crap out of you because you've just, indulged in certain things and got stuck in those patterns. So it just kind of plays both ways. So it likes to stimulate it. It uses it as distraction and avoidance of changes you need to do, avoidance of using your higher inner guidance, and so forth. So it's one of the tools they use. So addictions is ego-based. Now, of course, then the body gets somewhat programmed to receive certain things, but without the ego pushing it, you will find the addictions would dissolve very quickly. In fact, because then there's nothing to support and convince you that you need to do it. So, you know, a lot of times, a lot of our addictions is to do things a certain way. It's just to appease the ego's idea that, you know, we need to do this because this makes us feel good, because this is a way to punish yourself, or this is a way to reward yourself, this is a way to be yourself, or whatever. It's going to come up with all types of stuff. So just pay attention. If you got addictions, you're going to notice that it is something that the ego likes to use, stimulate, support it, and use it for distraction, because a lot of our addictions distract us from being ourselves, distract us to connect with ourselves, and distract us to be present in living our world. The other thing is makes it look outside of ourselves for constant validation. All of us notice needing to be validated. You need to be right. So the ego says, oh, this is the way it is. Now I need to get validated, because it's saying, well, you know, you're going to have to see other people that agree with you. Not only that, other people to massage you and to say, oh yeah, you're right, you're good, you're this or that, because first of all, it makes you feel inferior, but then you need validation that you're not. And then if you did something, you need validation to make you feel good, or else you did something, but then it's going to say, oh, you didn't do such a good job, or whatever it is. And that one is like, it's huge for a lot of people, and I've experienced it personally myself, and at times I do that. When I say validation, in the sense even saying, okay, you know, I'm making a difference, or whatever it is, because I can see other people having a change. But the interesting thing is, it doesn't matter how many lives you contribute or assist or make changes in, it always likes to do that. So you have to keep that in check, and eventually it starts to quiet down, so you don't need the validation. So the point is, it uses that as validation. The other thing it likes to do is set up its own value system. What's valuable, what's not valuable, what's good, what's bad, all of that stuff. And this is how you need to act. I mean, you have to agree with people. You need to massage people. You need to do this or that, or, you know, it sets its own values. If somebody treats you this way, then you can feel good, or else you don't feel good. In fact, they're attacking you. So it has its own values, its own conditions and expectations of playing the game, or whatever that may be. So that's the other thing it likes to do. Oh, the best, one of the good ones is that you cannot achieve any form of satisfaction no matter what is done. So it creates this illusion that if I get to this point, I will be satisfied. I'll be happy, I'll be content. But the thing is, the moment you're there, you may have a momentary elation, and then it dissolves it. And basically, you're not happy again, because now it looks for something else, and then something else. No matter what, it just keeps you so busy chasing this illusion to reach happiness, to reach satisfaction, and so forth. And the ego is designed never, ever, ever, ever to bring you satisfaction. Temporary tastes of it before it dangles the carrot again to some other point. And while you're at it, it's always going to make you feel dissatisfied. It's going to make you feel a certain way. So it uses that very powerfully. When it comes, you're going to say something?
Oh, no. Someone just is asking, Peter, what sort of world could we have without ego?
Well, one that would suck, probably, right?
Pretty nice. Nothing
Think
interfering with our creation.
Yes, of course, of course. Without the ego, and now that we've got some of these operating systems, of course, we would redesign most of our life. So the world will be a playground that everybody flourished, enjoyed, were themselves. There's no polarity experience in the sense of right, wrong, good, bad, no survival mode. None of that stuff would be part of the equation. It would be a very beautiful, natural dance. So without that, of course, the inverted matrix will no longer even be projected, because even though that's not being streamed any longer, we wouldn't hold it within our operating system. So things wouldn't go backwards. We would actually see it for what it is, and then we would upgrade everything and eliminate what no longer serves. When it comes to the fact of without the ego, you're no longer living on what we call the inverted 3D or 2D in that state of consciousness. So you're basically now, without the ego, you're that whole self that is navigating from a higher perspective and that is always upgrading and alignment to create a better and more expanded world or expanded experience. And that's how the world would look. So no satisfaction. The other thing is ego version of love. We all talk about love. We all fall in love, or we don't all fall in love. We all have experiences of love. We may love our life. We may love others. We may love certain scenarios, and then we have the opposite. We may hate certain people. We may hate certain aspects of our lives, or we may hate systems and whatever else, or people, or whatever it is. The ego has a very interesting version of love. It's a polarized love with tremendous amount of conditions. It has to meet conditions and expectations. Then it creates a facade of love, which always needs massaging and reinforcing. Because as soon as it doesn't meet those requirements and it's not fed, then that love changes. Now, is that pure love, or is that a projected idea of love? Ego only creates a projected idea of love. This is a lot of times when we fall in love. I mean, there's a purpose behind that because there's a higher aspect of it. But a lot of times the experience of love that we have is because certain conditions and expectations are met, and then we go into this automatic default. And it also makes us blind, because at that state, you're not even seeing anything. You're only seeing what the ego is wanting you to see, because it wants to create that facade. Then it usually at some point or another, it starts to show the other parts of it, and then that love starts to change and it starts to diminish or whatever it is. So the ego version of love is polarized. The ego version of love has conditions, expectations, and so forth. Where true love is very pure, because that's your essence. And that love is an appreciation for everything. That love sees itself in all that exists. Source itself is pure love because it's all itself and it's pure potentiality. So when we're talking about that, that also reflects in our own self. Because the ego's version of love is that if we do everything right and we're good and people adore you and so forth, then I love myself. If my body looks a certain way, or if I act a certain way, or that, I have certain accomplishment, then I love myself because, I'm awesome. But the ego love will also inflate it and make you project it. It's like, I'm special type of thing, connects it. But there's the flip side to that where, if it doesn't meet all those requirements, then it does the opposite. You're not unlovable, you're not capable, blah, blah, blah. So the whole thing about the idea that we need to love more of ourselves, really it's not about loving ourselves, it's really dissolving the part of the egotistical idea of love. And that is, get rid of the judgment, get rid of any comparison, get rid of all of that stuff, because that's what you're going to do. Then guess what? You naturally love. You love your expression. You love your experience. There's no judgment about the body. There's no judgment of what you look like. There's no judgment of your past, your history, your present, your engagements, or anything of that nature. But you now navigate through preference. So the whole thing about self-love goes to a whole complete level, because then it's not like I have to convince myself that I have to love myself. Because a lot of times when you say, well, I got to love myself more, well, what I say to them is just basically stop judging yourself, and you see that love is there. And you don't need anybody else to love you, because everybody is love, and that is reflected in every angle and every way possible at this point in time. It's just the ego creates categories and saying, well, the only time somebody loves you if they act this way, respond this way, or do something of that nature. So the other thing I wanted to mention, that the ego is not just the voice in your head. It comes in with thoughts, emotions, feelings, and so forth. So you have to look at it, you have to pay attention to all of that. If you're feeling, having thought forms, or even hearing voices in your mind because it's talking, and it's very polarized and it brings you up and down, it's the ego. So you have to pay attention to those. They're not just the incessant monkey mind and all of that, because it does like to use the monkey mind because it keeps you so busy that you're not processing other inputs that are coming in and other things that you're observing. Yeah, it does provide a lot of excuses and reasons why to keep a certain pattern, to do something, even when determined is not serving. So it says, no, we got to do this, we got to do this. And meanwhile, you know that this doesn't serve you. It doesn't serve you to be in that relationship or that job or in that friendship or that pattern of your life or that direction of how you shaped your life and so forth. But it will give you, well, you know, if you don't do that, you're not going to have anybody else in your life. Or if you don't do that, you're going to lose your job and you're not going to have any money. You're going to not have this. Or if you drop your relationships and nobody's there to take care of you and nobody's going to care for you, anything of that nature. And it's going to go on and on. And if you don't follow this pattern, that means we were wrong because we did all these choices and now here we are. So it will create a lot of that. And so it'll give you a lot of excuses why to stay in the pattern. But there's a flip side to that too, because it doesn't only go there, we got to keep in the pattern. Then it's going to make you feel bad about keeping the pattern. So there's going to be regret, there's going to be feeling that in some way, somehow I'm inadequate to change my life. And you know, first it wants to keep you in that scenario, and then it makes you feel bad because you are in that scenario. It labels you to associate yourselves with others. It labels you to disassociate you from others, from your environment, from your experience, from your connections. So the labels are, you're better, you're not better, you're acceptable, not acceptable. The labels is that you failed or you're good or you're amazing or whatever it is. And it creates labels. So you either associate with groups or people or whatever or facet of life, or disassociate. You're feeling that in one way or another that you are a misfit and that you're not going to fit in there. So the ego plays a very powerful role in so many, many ways. And I've just touched upon a lot of them that would, you know, give you an idea of how to play with this. Please spend the time to review this, make notes, and then observe. Observe within yourself. And use some of the other tools I've shared in the previous one. And so we're not in, you know, you don't want to get in a position where you hate your ego, that you need to fight your ego. You got to come to the point of saying, okay, the ego's been serving me. It's been perfect. However, I see it and come to the realization that it no longer serves you. Not that there's anything wrong with it. Those series of experiences, those series of creation, those patterns, and that distraction and everything else doesn't match where you are now because you want to move forward in a big way. You're advancing in a very powerful way, and you don't need the restrictions any longer. So that's what we're doing. And so don't judge it, don't fight it, just come to the realization it's been part of your life, but now, with that appreciation and love, it doesn't serve you any longer, so you start releasing it. Start letting it go. Every time it comes up, acknowledge it, thank it, love it, and send it off. Thank you. Not interested. We're not playing there anymore. We're done. We're done. No, we're not going there. Not no because I dread going there. No, we're not there. We're not there anymore. This is not part of the game anymore. I've chosen to step out of it. It's outside of me. And just use it at that. Okay? Was there anything else? No? Okay. So one thing I wanted to share. Saturday, this coming Saturday, we have a process that we're doing. Episode 23. The process is called Empowerment and Reconnection Process. It's about self-empowerment and reconnecting with ourselves. So is it a meditation activation? Not quite. It's really a process. It's a process that we do together. And it's a process that we utilize together to re-empower ourselves and to reconnect with ourselves, with all facets of it. So I would suggest strongly to share it and to participate live. Again, it will be recorded in video, so it will be available if you can't join us. It will be at 4 p.m. Eastern time, so the same time that we started here for today and the regular different episodes. So this coming Saturday, process, we get to play, we get to empower, reconnect, and that's what we're going to do. So join us if you wish. And I thank everybody for participating and for going through these 2 episodes on ego. It's a very powerful one for the sense of understanding how it works and how we can move through it. The process itself on Saturday will facilitate in clearing some of that stuff that we're doing, at least create an opening for you to do it more effectively. So anything that we share, just repeat it. Share it with others. I thank you for all the support that the ones that have supported. We're open if all of this resonates in one way or another, finding it valuable and anything else, feel free to support us, financially. In the link we have in the description we have the link that takes us to the PayPal, so you can contribute to support this work so that we can continue paying for all the services and also support ourselves so that we can bring more and more of this content forward to you to facilitate yourself. This is a very powerful time for us to move forward and transition. So there's, this is why we're putting this much effort. It's all available for free, and again, we're open for your support as you feel. So. In the description, there's also other workshops that are available. You can check those out to see what resonates for you, and we'll support you on your journey. And also at the same time, we also have the link for the website. If you go in and join the community, you will get notifications, or what we can call emails time to time, to let you know of different events and different shows and so forth. We are launching the podcast, Advancing Consciousness podcast, within a week or so, possibly a little longer. Yeah, a little bit over a week from now. If we can bring it in sooner, we will. That will run about 5 times a week. They'll be shorter, and it'll be a video audio, mostly focused on audio with a little bit of video. It won't be this type of lesson, and it won't be as long either, but we'll take each topic and dissect every part of it and go into it a little bit deeper. That you can take while you're doing other work, because most of it is all going to be geared to what we call audio version, but then there'll be a video with it also, so you can watch it or you can just listen to it while you're doing it. So that's coming in. And some of the contributions that have been coming in have been supporting us in getting all the infrastructures and the equipment and whatever else that we need to create this so-called daily podcast. So thank you again. Until we see you on Saturday, if you choose to join us, have a blast. Go enjoy your journey of life. And Kimberly, unless there was anything else?
No, I don't think so, honey.
Okay, cool.
Thank you.
Till next time. See you later.